Alright, so you want to set up your base canopy to your skydiving rig. This is actually the first thing I wanted to do after my course at the bridge, because typically when you're doing base jumps, you're not getting a lot of time on your canopy. Canopy flights usually vary between maybe 5 seconds to like 30 seconds on the higher end if you're doing some pretty big cliffs. If you do 50 base jumps, each one's about 15 seconds or so, you're going to be basically averaging about 12 minutes or so of canopy flight. So if you do a few skydives, we're basically going to do the equivalent of, nearly 100 base jumps. After looking through the internet quite a bit, I didn't find a lot of material on the exact method in rigging your base canopy to your sky rig. There's a few videos here and there, but there wasn't much. So I figured I'd make a video myself. So I spoke with Todd over at Apex to try and get a feel for the best way in doing this, because the gear is actually different between base gear and sky gear. So I wanted to make sure I knew what I was doing and I wasn't just going into this blindly, because it can get really dangerous. So I'm gonna walk you guys through exactly how I'm rigging my base canopy off of my base container, and then I'm putting it onto my skydiving rig. I hope you guys enjoy. Alright, so we have all of our packing tools here. We got a wrench for the hard link to connect the D-bag. We're gonna have our slider here. This is actually Apex remove a slider or RAS slider. We got a pull-up cord, an extra clamp, and some rubber bands. So the first thing we're gonna do is actually remove our base jumping toggles from our brake lines. The base jumping toggles we're not gonna be using on our sky rig, because the toggles on our sky rig are actually specific to the risers, and we wanna be able to keep them locked in until we wanna use them. The brake lines here are going to look a little funny because they're not stowed in their brake settings, so they're going to look like they have a ton of slack. Go ahead and swap out the other toggle. So on the remove a slider, or the RAS slider that Apex makes, the grommets that you actually connect the slider to just stow nice and safely right on the base risers. So I like setting up my front risers in the middle and kind of spreading the rear risers out to the outside. This just makes it a little easier to visualize and keep track of the lines themselves. I'm just gonna straighten out the lines a little bit just so I can see that they're going the correct way to the canopy. It's always good to double check and, just make sure that everything is in order, because the last thing you want is a misrigging where you don't find out something's wrong until the canopy is overhead and you potentially might have a cutaway. So first thing we're gonna do is actually route our brake lines through the connecting grommets that are gonna be set to the slider. These are the grommets on the rear risers, and we do want the brake line to go on the inside of that grommet. We also want to be sure that the slider is oriented correctly. It is a rectangle, it's not a square, so we want the widest side to go left to right and the shorter side to go front to back. I'm going to remove the little yellow cable here. It's very similar to a cutaway cable. We'll slide the fabric through the metal grommet that's attached to the lines. Then you'll just slide the yellow cable back in to secure it. And then we're just going to go ahead and repeat this on the remaining 3 connection points. This remove a slider is super helpful if you're going to switch from a slider down to a slider up jump. Typically you'd have to go and take apart your soft links and your hard links in order to do so. This kind of gets that all out of the way, so you don't have to worry about misrigging something. So I'm just double checking here to make sure that I have it oriented correctly and I didn't do something weird when I was connecting all of them right now. Everything looks good. Now we're going to remove the soft links from our sky risers. This can be a little tough to do without hemostats. I actually forgot my hemostats, so I'm going to go ahead and just disconnect them with my fingers here. We want to undo the soft link through the riser and then through the lines once. You'll notice that the soft links go through the riser and the lines twice. So we want to make sure we keep the lines connected to the soft link, but the soft link disconnected from the riser. If we keep them on the soft link, it'll allow us to reconnect our lines and our sky canopy back to our sky rig later. You don't want to put any twists here, we'll just set these aside. And then we'll go ahead and repeat removing the soft links on the remaining 3 risers. Now we're going to remove the toggles, unstow the brakes, and then disconnect our skydiving brake lines from our skydiving toggles. You'll notice the connection points on our skydiving risers have the stow up top and then a little metal pin to secure the bottom, whereas the base toggles are just going to have Velcro securing them, so that's why we want to switch out our toggles. We'll just leave our toggle here and then remove our brake line from the guide ring on the riser, set it aside, and then repeat on the other toggle. We're going to go ahead and repeat removing the soft links on the front 2 risers now. So now we have our skydiving canopy with no canopy attached, the toggles sitting just by themselves. And now we're going to transition our base canopy directly to the risers on our skydiving canopy. So the first thing that I'm going to do is reattach the base jumping brake lines to our skydiving toggles to be sure that they actually fit correctly and that we're in good shape. Feed it through from the bottom. And then feed the bottom of the toggle back through the finger trap. Looking good. Give it a little tug just to make sure it's secure. I ended up actually readjusting these to the bottom connection point later, after I realized that once my brakes were in full flight that they actually stopped at the guide ring, and I wanted them to actually allow the canopy to go into full flight. So we're just going to go ahead and repeat this on the second toggle. Then we're going to grab our sky rig and just place it directly on top of our base container. I found this was the easiest way to visualize everything and make sure we can connect it directly. Now I'm going to spread the risers so that the fronts of the sky rig on the inside right next to the fronts of the base container, and then the rears on both are on the outside. So here we're going to do both of the front risers first. The soft links in the base container are quite a bit stiffer because they're newer, and they're also thicker because they need to actually be able to bear heavier loads, in the base environment. So we want to make sure that we feed the base soft link through the sky riser twice, and then through the base lines twice as well. Then we're going to loop the soft link through itself and then back over the stopping point to make sure it's secure. Once it's set, we're going to give it a little bit of a tug, make sure it stays locked in place. And then we're just going to tuck that little stopper right underneath the riser so that it doesn't come out. Give it another tug for love. And then we're just going to repeat this on the remaining 3 risers. This can be a little bit easier with hard links. You're basically going to follow the same method if you have hard links, only you'll need a wrench to disconnect them. I'm gonna go ahead and just do the brakes here just so we can keep track of those, make sure we don't cross them over at all. And then I'll go ahead and stow the other side as well. Alright, so we're gonna remove the D-bag from our skydiving canopy now. Should mention this hard leg wasn't this loose. I actually went over a lot of this gear before I filmed this video, just to make sure I knew what I was doing. So we're just gonna loosen the hard link at the center cell attachment point. Remove it from our sky canopy and then hook it to the center cell attachment point on our base canopy. It's good to double check that your D-bag will fit your canopy before hooking it all up. I was pretty confident that mine would fit because this D-bag actually fit a 170 standard fabric skydiving canopy, and I'm trying to fit a 210 ultralight base canopy in it. You're just gonna finger tighten this as much as you can and then go about a quarter turn with the wrench to make sure it's secured. Now I'm gonna just do a continuity check just to make sure all my lines are good from my sky rig all the way up to the base canopy. Front A's and B's are good, C's and D's look good, and the control lines look good on one side, but the other side it looks like they might be crossed over a little bit. So I'm gonna untwist it from the canopy and then just follow it back down to the riser and see how it might be crossed over. And this is exactly why you want to do this, to make sure that you don't have any lines crossed over and nothing weird's going on. Do another continuity check to make sure that solved all my problems. Check all the lines through the slider. Brake lines look good on this side. I'm just gonna set this guy down. I'm actually gonna pull the slider all the way down to the bottom just to make it a little easier to check all the lines. Now I'm gonna do my 4-line check. Grab the front risers in my right hand and the rear risers and control lines on my left and just walk those up to the canopy to flip the right side of the canopy facing up. So I'm gonna grab the control line on my right rear riser. I'm gonna grab the furthest outside line on my right rear riser. I'm just gonna follow them through the slider. And then I'm gonna grab the furthest outside line on my front right riser. I'm just gonna walk these up to the canopy. Make sure that nothing's crossed over all the way up to the fabric. Then I'm gonna grab the control line points and actually make sure that they're oriented correctly from the fabric just by grabbing the folds like this. I'm just gonna lace my fingers in here in the 4 line cascade points all the way back to the split, and then I'm gonna trace the line all the way back to the toggle just to make sure we get all the twists out. This guy's definitely twisted, so we're gonna wanna fix that. So we're just gonna unstow our brakes. Be sure everything is oriented correctly. And this is actually the point where I'm going to take the brake line off the toggle, feed it through the guide ring, and then mount it back to the toggle. Just gonna feed the brake line through the guide ring, keeping the orientation exactly how it was. We're gonna hold that with our foot to make sure we don't twist it when we connect it to the toggle again. We're gonna go back to the bottom of the toggle here, hold all the way through the finger trap points, and then feed the bottom of the toggle back through the line. gonna give it a little love tug just to make sure it's secure. Then we'll go ahead and set our brakes in the shallowest brake setting here. And then we'll just stow our brakes back on the riser. And we're gonna do a 4-line check again just as we did, just to make sure that everything is still good. Looks like we have about a half a twist, but it's nothing too concerning. It's gonna be just how the line is kind of set up. So we'll leave that. Now we're gonna twist the canopy up on the other side so that the left side of the canopy is facing up. We'll do a 4-line check. We'll check the brake line all the way back down to the riser. We're gonna unstow the brake, and then we're gonna feed the brake line through the guide ring. Make sure it's secure. Then we're gonna do a 4-line check for a second time on this side, and just make sure we don't have any twists in the brake line. All right, so we have the risers connected to the base canopy, we have the slider on, we have the D-bag connected to the base canopy, we've done a 4-line check, we have both brake lines through the guide rings, all the twists out of the brakes, and the toggles stowed to our risers. Now we're gonna check every line just to be sure that there isn't any line that has crossed over during the re-rigging here. I don't really have anywhere I can clamp up my canopy, so I'm actually just gonna do it with the bottom skin of the canopy facing up. And you're gonna do this by pulling the nose down towards the rig and the tail away from the rig. And as I'm doing this, I'm doing the rear risers first. I'm gonna make sure all the C and D lines as well as the brake lines are set up correctly. You wanna make sure the brake lines are gonna be on top, followed by the C's and D's beneath those, and they're connecting from the right to the left. Then we're gonna check the front risers and be sure all these lines are beneath the ones we just checked. These are gonna be the A and B lines. So we have the furthest two on the outside, followed by the next, the second innermost, and then the innermost. And then we're just gonna go ahead and repeat this on the other side. All right, we're just double checking our brakes, making sure they're both set to the same setting. And we're just gonna stow all of the excess line. We're gonna go ahead and do another continuity check. Can't ever have too many continuity checks, it's always good to be safe. So we have our slider all the way up against the canopy. Just want to make sure all of our lines are oriented right. Canopy doesn't have any twists in it. Then we're gonna start flaking out the canopy as if we were packing it like a skydiving canopy. Make sure all the fabric is on the outside, lines to the center. You can go ahead and put your slider up over your shoulder if it makes it easier for you. You can flat pack your canopy as if you were packing it for a base jump. It does take less space, and this is what you typically do if you don't have a D-bag. But because we're using a D-bag here, we're just gonna go ahead and pack it like any old skydiving canopy. And we're gonna move the slider down and quarter it. But one thing that you do here that you don't do with skydiving canopies typically is we're actually gonna stow the slider to the innermost C line directly across from where our tailgate is to make sure that we stage our opening. This is even more important to do if you aren't using a D-bag, because the slider can make its way down the lines prematurely, and when you're going terminal, you really don't want that to happen. It can cause severe damage to your gear, and it can even injure or kill you. So we're just gonna use a little tailgate rubber band. We're gonna feed it through the line connection point where it feeds to the tape that connects to the fabric. We're gonna slide that through. We wanna make sure that we don't pull on the lines too much. Make sure you have all the fabric on the outside if you do pull on a little bit. And then we're gonna grab the center point on the slider. We're gonna pinch that and pull it down and then fold it back a little bit. And then we're just gonna do 2 wraps over that. You can do a third if you want. You can experiment with this to see if it has more or less of an effect if you stow it a little bit more. Because we are using a mesh slider here and not a sail slider made out of ZP, this is extra important because the slider isn't gonna catch as much wind or nearly any wind compared to ZP fabric. Then we're just gonna go ahead and grab the tail, pull it up over the pack job, give it a few twists to keep it secure. Then we'll lay it down, push all the air out. Make sure our D-bag is oriented right. And we're gonna actually use our Sky pilot chute for this. We wanna make sure that we cock our pilot chute if your pilot chute does have this feature. We're just gonna pack it down and S-fold it so that it can fit in the D-bag. Once we're able to secure all the fabric from our canopy inside the D-bag, we're just gonna go ahead and stow all the lines like we would a skydiving canopy. Looks pretty good. I think so. Now we're just gonna flip our D-bag up over our skydiving container. Now it's the moment of truth. We're gonna stow our risers as we would. Turns out the closing loop is too short for this. I did have a 115 here before, and luckily I had an extra closing loop that was a little bit longer. I was able to tie just a single knot in it and then put the metal washer back on to secure it. We'll grab our pull-up cord, feed it through the closing loop. Feed that back through the top of our pack tray. And then we'll just close our container. Feed our pin through the closing loop, take our pull-up cord out. Fold our pilot chute. Stuff it in the BOC. And that baby's good to jump. You'll also notice here, the openings are gonna be quite a bit harder than they are on a typical skydiving canopy. We are using a slider, but it is a mesh slider as opposed to a sail slider. I tried rolling the nose when I was packing it a lot of times. I tried changing the packing and I still got pretty hard openings. So you definitely wanna be mindful, and it can definitely, get uncomfortable and sometimes almost painful when you're opening it at terminal speeds. So you wanna fully box out, especially if you're in a track or doing something else. You wanna make sure you're spread out, slowing down as much as you can before you're pitching. So I just tried different maneuvers, hard turns on risers, right and left. Tried doing turns on toggles, right and left. And something that's important to note is if you're gonna be stalling the canopy on toggles or risers and you're going all the way until the canopy fully collapses, you don't wanna let up super quick because that canopy is gonna wanna surge back into flight and it can almost kick you back over. So definitely be mindful there. Well, I hope this video can help you guys get more flight time on your canopy. And if you're thinking about kind of rigging your base canopy to a sky rig, that this can, kind of walk you through it a little bit. If you have any questions, definitely let me know. I'll try and help any way I can. You guys are gonna want to speak to a certified rigger and, and other experienced base jumpers before you do any of this. Cool. See you guys in the next video.